Attention Britain. A queen was removed from a royal engagement inside 2 hours because an 8-year-old boy was crying in a corridor. Not a scheduling clash. Not a security alert. Because Princess Anne walked into a drawing room, stopped in front of Queen Camilla, and said one sentence that stopped the room. "How dare you hurt him?" Then she said 2 more words. "Back off." That is not palace gossip. That is the story from inside the room. And the reason Camilla went after that little boy is not the reason the palace gave. I'll show you the document that proves the rule she used never existed. I'll show you the photograph that made Britain decide this story before the palace could spin it. And I'll show you why an 8-year-old running down a corridor changed the line of succession in ways nobody in that building expected. Quick before we go deeper, I'm George, and at Dan Bam, we don't deal in palace headlines. We follow the details. Every report, every overlooked account, every missing piece. Louis is William and Catherine's youngest, 8 years old. The country has watched him grow up in a way it never watched his father grow up. You have seen him on the balcony pulling faces. You saw him with George and Charlotte at the Commonwealth Games at the start of the month. 3 children in public, the way that family now does things on purpose. That is not an accident. That is a decision. The country feels something about those 3 children that it has never felt about a royal child before, because it has been allowed to see them behave like children. George looking bored. Charlotte telling her brother off. Louis doing whatever Louis is doing at any given moment. And that difference matters more than most people realize. His father and his uncle were raised under a system that treated visible feeling as a fault to be trained out of a boy. Louis is being raised by 2 people who decided deliberately that their children would be allowed to be people first. That single decision is the quiet revolution inside that house. William and Catherine made a set of choices early on, and they have never moved off them. The children go to school like other children. They are photographed twice a year and left alone the rest of the time. They are allowed to say they are tired. They are allowed to say they do not want to. And they are allowed to miss somebody out loud. Sitting right at the center of that decision is the grandmother none of the 3 children ever met. Diana died in Paris on the 31st of August, 1997, more than 20 years before Louis was born. He has no memory of her and never will. And yet she is in that house every day because William made sure of it. He does it through photographs on a side table, through stories told at bedtime, through small objects that belong to her and have been kept for the exact purpose of being handed down. Statements and anniversary appearances have nothing to do with it. Those are for the country. This is for the children. I keep coming back to why he does that, and I think the answer is not complicated at all. William was 15 years old on the 6th of September, 1997. Walking behind his mother's coffin in a dark suit while a million people stood on the pavement and watched him do it. Nobody protected him from that. He has spent the rest of his life making certain his own children get something he did not get. Hold on to that because it comes back 3 or 4 times before the end of this. Everything that happened in that drawing room happened because a man who lost his mother at 15 decided his children would never be told to put her away. The family moved to Forest Lodge in Windsor Great Park in October 2025 on a lease reported to run 20 years. New house. Same rule. Diana's things came with them. That brings me to the morning it happened. There was a private family gathering arranged before a major official court function. Senior royals in the reception rooms beforehand, the way they always are. 30 minutes of standing around with drinks, nobody finishes while the cars are organised outside. Earlier that same morning, William had given his youngest son something, a small vintage silver lapel pin. The vault has nothing to do with this. There is no inventory number on it, no insurer attached to it, no curator who signs it out of a case. A modest silver pin that belonged to Diana in the early 1990s, kept privately by William for years and passed down to his youngest son that morning as a quiet piece of family continuity. The pin itself is not worth much. You could buy one like it at a vintage market for less than a decent watch. That is not the point. The point is whose it was and what it carried. The choice of that particular morning is the part I find myself thinking about. William did not hand it over at Christmas, or on a birthday, or on any date with a meaning attached to it. He gave it to his youngest son on an ordinary morning before a work event, which tells me he wanted it to be ordinary. He wanted the boy to have his grandmother's pin in his pocket the way any child has their grandmother's something in their pocket, without a ceremony around it. Picture an 8-year-old with that in his jacket. He is not thinking about court dress. He is thinking that he is carrying his grandmother into a room full of adults and that his dad trusted him with it. He had it tucked inside his blazer and he kept checking it was still there, the way children do. And he did check several times. Staff who were in that room remember him putting his hand flat against his jacket the way you do when you are carrying something that matters and you have not got used to having it yet. That is the whole crime, by the way. Keep that in mind for the next 20 minutes because everything that follows was triggered by a boy wearing his grandmother's pin inside his own jacket. Now picture the room. Those pre-event reception rooms are not grand in the way the pictures make them look. Furniture pushed back against the walls, a couple of tables with glasses on them, 6 or 7 senior members of a family standing in ones and twos, a dozen staff moving through with trays and lists, and everybody watching the clock because the cars leave when the cars leave. The atmosphere in those reception rooms was relaxed. Family, a bit of noise, staff moving through with trays, and then Queen Camilla noticed the silver inside young Prince Louis's jacket. According to sources close to household staff who were in the room, she went straight over to him. She went past William. She went past Catherine. She stopped in front of the 8-year-old. I want you to sit with that for a second because the choice of who to speak to is the whole character of the thing. Both of that boy's parents were standing in the room. Either one of them could have been taken aside in 4 seconds. The correction went to the child. She told him the keepsake was not appropriate for a young prince to wear at an official function. She put it in terms of court protocol, formal dress standards, the way things are done, and she said it to a child who had no idea any of those words applied to him. And she said it in front of people. That is the detail I cannot get past. Staff with trays, aides with folders, other members of the family standing 6 feet away with drinks in their hands, and a small boy being told in front of all of them that something about him was wrong. Then she went further. She insisted the pin be taken off and handed over to palace staff for safekeeping on the grounds that personal family mementos have no place in a public-facing court environment where every detail gets photographed and picked apart. Now stay with me here because this is the moment the whole thing turns. Try to hear this from where the boy was standing. He is 8. A very senior adult, one of the most powerful people in the building, is standing over him telling him that something on his jacket is wrong and has to be taken off him and given to a stranger. He does not know what protocol is. He does not know what a dress standard is. He knows one thing with total clarity. His dad gave him this that morning, and now somebody wants it. Louis tried to hold on to it. He explained it the way an 8-year-old explains anything, which is honestly and badly. His father gave it to him. It was his grandmother Diana's. He wanted to keep it so he could remember her. He told a room full of adults exactly why the object mattered in the plainest language available to him, and it changed nothing. That is the moment it could have ended right there. One adult in that room saying, "Of course, keep it. Off you go." And this video does not exist, and nobody outside the household ever hears a word about it. Camilla did not soften. She did not step back and let the boy's parents handle it quietly in the next room, which is what any of us would have done. She reportedly doubled down, saying palace rules on formal dress were absolute and that individual exceptions were not being made. Think about the arithmetic in that sentence for a second. An absolute rule applied to an 8-year-old over a pin the size of a fingernail in a private room before anyone had even left the building. And honestly, that is the part that gets me. It stopped being about a lapel pin the moment the child told her where it came from. Because after that sentence, everybody in the room knew exactly what was on his jacket and exactly whose it had been. Louis broke. He was frightened by the tone, confused by the pressure, and terrified that the thing his father had trusted him with that morning was about to be taken off him by an adult he could not argue with. He closed his fist around the pin, turned, and ran out of the drawing room to find a corner of the corridor where the guests could not see him crying. And that is exactly when Anne came around the corner. Those corridors are long and they are cold, and there is nowhere in them for a small person to hide. He got about halfway down and stopped by a window because there was nowhere else to go. The timing here is the entire story. 10 seconds either way, and this gets smoothed over, handled quietly, buried the way this family has buried 1,000 things. Instead, the Princess Royal walked into a hallway and found her great-nephew with his face in his hands and his shoulders going. She asked him what happened. He told her. He told her in the broken-up way an 8-year-old tells you anything when he is still crying, and she crouched down and waited until he had finished. Then she asked him one more time who had said it. He told her that as well. Now, think about what she was walking into. Her brother's wife, the Queen. A room full of senior aides and family 30 minutes before an official function with the cars already lined up outside. Every instinct that building trains into a person says you deal with that later quietly through the proper channels. Then she went into the drawing room. She did not go and find his mother first. She did not go and find a member of staff and ask what the situation was. She got the account from the 8-year-old, believed him, and walked back the way he had come. Anne is not a woman who works up to things. There was no diplomatic run-up, no polite inquiry to a member of staff, no request for a private word later. Witnesses describe her walking straight across the room, stopping directly in front of Camilla, and going in with nothing held back at all. "How dare you hurt him?" Then the 2 words that went down the corridor and stopped every conversation in the building. "Back off." She told Camilla in front of aides and family that enforcing cold protocol on a child who was carrying a memory of his dead grandmother was not acceptable inside a family, and that it never had been. She said it at normal volume. That is what people who were there keep coming back to. No shouting, no theatre, a completely level voice saying the worst sentence anybody in that room had ever heard said out loud. Then she said it again in fewer words, the way she does when she has decided a conversation is finished. "Back off." Nobody in that room said a word. The senior aide stopped mid-sentence. And honestly, from everything I have ever read about how that household operates, I do not think a single person in there had ever seen a queen spoken to like that in their working lives. Now, to understand why that landed the way it did, you need to understand what Anne is inside that building. And it has almost nothing to do with rank. Rank is the least of it. And honestly, rank is almost irrelevant in that room, which is the thing people outside the palace never quite believe. She is the only daughter of Elizabeth II and Prince Philip. She has been working for the crown since before most of the staff in that room were born. The court circular totals for last year put her on 478 official engagements against the king's 532, and she covered hers across more working days than anybody else in the family. She is 75 years old and she outworks people half her age, and every member of that household knows it. And if you want to know what that household actually thinks of her, look at what happened in June 2024 when she was hurt at Gatcombe Park and spent 5 nights in hospital with a head injury she still does not remember getting. She was back on the diary weeks later. She has never once mentioned it since. She also declined the one thing everybody else in that family reaches for. Decades ago, she asked that her own children be given no titles at all, and they have none to this day. Think about what that means. She spent her whole life inside an institution built on titles and refused to spend its currency on her own kids. Anne stands up and nothing formal happens at all. The Princess Royal holds no authority whatsoever over a queen. And everybody in that drawing room knew it. She has 50 years of never once using the family name for her own benefit. And that is why the room went silent instead of arguing back. There is something about that woman that the country worked out years ago, and the palace still underestimates. She has no ambition inside that family. None. She is not competing for a role. She is not building a position. She has nothing at all to gain from any argument in any room. And so when she stands up, everybody present knows she is not doing it for herself. And that is the most dangerous thing anybody in that institution can be. There is one more piece, and it matters more than the rest of it put together. Anne knew Diana properly. The documentaries never got anywhere near it. The working relationship between those 2 women was real. 2 people who both understood exactly what that machine does to somebody who does not fit its shape. They were never close in the way people imagine, and they understood each other completely. Those 2 things are not in conflict. She watched what that machine did to Diana from a closer distance than almost anybody. She was in the building through all of it. Through the years, the newspapers ran the marriage across their front pages, through the divorce, through the funeral. She never gave an interview about any of it, and she never will. She was not defending a lapel pin in that drawing room. She was standing on a line that had been crossed a long time before that afternoon, and she picked the moment to say so out loud. The story leaves protocol behind entirely at this point because somebody in that household went and checked the paperwork. Somebody under my last video wrote that the royals never break a rule. They decide which rules exist that morning. I have not been able to get that line out of my head since I started looking at this one, and you will see why in about 30 seconds. And now I owe you the thing I held back at the start. Every official function of that kind comes with a dress instruction. Boring document. It goes around the households in advance. It says what the men wear, what the women wear, what the children wear, where the decorations are worn. All of it. It exists so nobody turns up wrong. It gets circulated days ahead so that nobody arrives in the wrong thing and gets photographed being the odd one out. Every household gets a copy. Every private secretary reads it. It is the most unglamorous piece of paper in that entire building, and it settles arguments because it is the only thing anybody can point at. Somebody pulled the instruction for that function. There was no rule. I read it twice. I went looking for the sentence that would have justified what happened because I assumed it was in there somewhere and had been badly applied. Nothing in that document said anything about personal keepsakes. Nothing prohibited a child from wearing a family item. Nothing required anything to be handed to staff for safekeeping. The pin broke no dress standard, no protocol, no palace regulation because no such regulation existed for what an 8-year-old wears inside his own jacket. I read that and I had to go back over the sequence twice because it turns the whole afternoon inside out. Every word spoken to that child in that drawing room was built on a rule that did not exist. The absolute palace regulation, the standard that admitted no exceptions, the thing that could not be bent for one 8-year-old. None of it was written down anywhere because there was nothing to write down. Sit with that for a second because it changes the entire shape of the afternoon. Camilla did not enforce a rule on that little boy. She invented one in the middle of a drawing room and enforced it on the only person in the room who could not check. And once that came out, the question stopped being about dress codes and started being about the pin itself. Nobody has confirmed what was going through Camilla's mind when she saw it, and nobody involved is ever going to. The pin dates from the early 1990s. Diana wore it in that period, and Camilla was inside that story from the beginning, and remembers those years better than almost anybody alive. Nobody has ever confirmed a word of that, and I want to be straight with you that this next part is me reading the sequence rather than quoting anybody. That is my reading of it, and you can take it or leave it. She did not see a dress code violation on that child's blazer. She recognized the thing because a dress code argument has a shape, and this had a different shape entirely. A dress code argument is slow. It goes through a private secretary, it gets raised with the parents, it gets settled in a corridor in 30 seconds by 2 adults who have done it 100 times. This was instant. It went straight past both parents, and it did not stop when the child gave the reason. Think about how much sense that makes of everything else. It explains the speed. It explains why she went to the boy instead of his parents. It explains why she would not step back when he explained where it came from. Because the explanation was the problem. Every second that Pin stayed on his jacket in a room full of senior royals and staff was a second in which Diana was quietly present at an official function through her grandson. An 8-year-old walked into that room wearing his grandmother, and the woman who spent 30 years living in that woman's shadow reached for a rule that was not there. That is the reason the title of this video promised you, and it is the reason that went round Britain when it finally got out. Not a dress code, not a difficult afternoon. A grown woman looked at a small silver pin on a child's blazer, knew exactly what it was and exactly whose it had been, and reached for an authority she did not have to get it off him before the cameras outside could see it. And when the household worked that out over the following days, it went through those corridors faster than any official communication ever has. William got there before any of that surfaced. Staff had gone to find him the moment the boy ran, which tells you something in itself about where the loyalties sit in that building.